Are you in your house? I guess.
No, this is kind of my tack room leather shop.
Oh, okay.
Ben assumed you lived like in a shack.
It was about 10 years ago.
I can't see it that well. Oh, really?
You want a quick tour?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, I'll just spin my laptop around. So, man, so this is the door out into the arena, which is kind of a mess, but you can see that window out there. So there's the arena. I've just got like a TV.
Oh,
I'm not seeing anything yet. Are you seeing it, Joe?
Yeah.
Okay. You have to describe it to me in pictographs.
That's hard to show with this old
Looks
laptop.
like a nice little indoor.
Yeah, it's pretty good size indoor. It's like 210 by 80.
Oh, that is a good size.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've stalked your Instagram account a little bit, so I think that's the one you've got some photos of, right?
Yeah. Yep. Only indoor I've ever had. It was built in the 60s back then there were hardly any of them. By the family that started and patented the rainbird sprinkler. You guys familiar with that, or at least that term?
No.
Never heard of a rainbird, really?
I may have seen one, but I've never heard the term.
Yeah, I mean, it's like every sprinkler.
Rainbird sprinkler.
Yeah.
Okay.
The LaFetra family built this arena in the 60s, and they had a couple ranches here. And the guy who managed it was, I guess, a big-time cutting horse trainer named Jess Turner. So that's about as much as I've uncovered. But it's a pretty cool spot. I've got 38 stalls, so I'm loaded.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Do you have 38 horses?
No. No, I was dangling around the mid-20s.
That's good.
And now I'm below the 20 mark, thankfully.
Yeah, I know. Wow. It can get nuts when you have too many. Well, anyway, man, let's get right into this podcast. Max Young. Got Max Young on. Thanks for coming on, man. This is going to be fun hanging out with you.
Yeah.
And
I appreciate you guys bringing me on.
It's good to see you.
You too, man.
Because you were down here. Joe and I, so Joe, you were here too, right? I get so confused because we do these events at the ranch, and I can't remember who was at what. But I think, Joe, you were here at the same time Max was here, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I thought, it seems like it. Yeah, dude, that was a lot of fun. That was that like a month? That was a month and a half ago, maybe?
Yeah, 5-6 weeks.
Yeah, like the beginning of April.
Yeah. So I know we didn't get a ton of time to get to know you, but you get a couple of those back porch, late night, lively conversations with Bill Barnes going, and everybody seems like a good podcast guest pretty quick. But
you cut through the noise when you're in that setting. Everybody's kind of at their best out there on the porch.
Yeah, Bill and I were out there last night screwing around with AI, asking it all kind of stuff. Just the two of us. We were up till probably 2:00, but and I was like, I got to get to bed because I got to get up early and figure out some stuff about Max. But how did that concert go that you went to? You went and saw Natalie, right, with Lori Morgan and Pam Tillis when they came to Chinook, that Chinook cool. Winds Casino.
Yep, out in Lincoln City, Oregon. Oh, we had a blast. I took my wife. It was the night before Mother's Day. And so it was cool to kind of have an excuse to go and kind of know somebody in the band and not know, but, have a connection there.
Yeah.
And, we loved the concert. Pam and Lori were so, they killed it, they're just in their glory still, but they're also pretty self-aware about who their audience is at this point. They made one joke. They were kind of bantering about their swag, their merch. And one goes to the other, did you forget to order the pot holders? And that had me dying, those little holders for the handle of the pot, total grandma merch. But no, we had a blast. They were great. And Natalie is such an awesome woman. It was a real pleasure to meet her.
Yeah,
That's
she's
awesome,
definitely
man.
a talent on the fiddle. Man, that's great. I would like to see her play with somebody sometime. I don't know. They came through here, but you just don't get away when you have horses, right? We got to get our number down below 20 like you. Then we might be able
I
to
know.
go to some concerts.
I got 7 foals coming this year. So like, can I sell them as fast as I can breed them? I don't know.
Yeah. So actually, for a little context for ourselves even, could you tell us a little bit about your farm there and what you guys are doing right now?
For sure. So we raise gaited horses. Started out in the Tennessee Walker world. I showed a lot as a kid. That's kind of how my horsemanship really started, was like 10, 11, 12 years old. I was hitting that show circuit pretty hard. And then, as I got to that age, that preteen age, I was like, why am I riding Western pleasure in a circle in an arena? This is no practical application. So kind of took a step back and just rode for fun for a number of years. And then after high school, in high school, I went and cowboyed a little bit on sheep ranch and a dude ranch. And then after high school, went and rode with some big outfits. And then, kind of went exploring and came back and then started collecting. You know how that goes.
So what? Go ahead, Joe.
What breed of gaited horses are you doing now?
So we've still got Tennessee Walkers. Our stallion's a Tennessee Walker, and he's just beautiful. I mean, there's some of the top people in the breed think he's the best on the West Coast, probably, because he's a mover and super handsome. And we've got a number of Tennessee Walker mares as well, but we're trying to switch over to this breed called the McCurdy Plantation horse. And those horses, they were done by this one plantation in Alabama. The McCurdy family still runs the registry, and they're closely related to the Walkers. So a lot of the people breeding the McCurdys back in the 30s, when the walking horse registry was founded, they would take their McCurdy studs and get them registered as walking horses. But they kept their own quality standard for their breed. So they don't like everything the walking horses do. So they'll allow like an appendix registry, but at 3 years old, they've got to be under saddle on a loose rein and show the gaits properly to be foundation registered.
Gotcha.
They're just kind of the crossover.
Okay, interesting. I've never heard of that breed. Yeah, no, that's great. I'm looking at their website right now.
Yeah, they're kind of cool. There's like 800 of them
the
registered, and I haven't counted in a while. But at a point, we had 8, and so we're like 1% of the whole population here.
Nice.
When you went out and you were riding for some of those bigger outfits, did you take a walking horse with you, or were you riding quarter horses?
So the first places I went in Montana, I was hired specifically because I was a gaited horse guy. So I had a sheep herder, or sheep rancher, I should say, hire me because his herder used walkers. And so they had me starting their colts for their sheep herder. And then once I got those horses rode, I went and worked on a dude ranch in the same vicinity, and they put me on their walkers as well. So initially I was just riding people's gaited horses. And then when I went to the bigger outfits in Oregon, they don't have time for that kind of stuff. You ride their horses.
Yeah.
So especially I was 18
when
I went and rode on the big outfits. So yeah.
I really have no experience with walking horses, hardly at all. And then here on the East Coast, a lot of times you think of the guys in Tennessee in the big black coats with the like Tennessee Walkers doing the competition with the weighted hoofs and stuff.
Yeah, the big licks.
So I don't have hardly any experience with them in a working environment. So is that more common among sheep herders to want to use a walking horse?
I think I've met a number of ranchers in Montana who like riding gaited horses. I don't think they're as handy in the branding pen generally because they don't have that just lightning fast run. But as far as like riding a big circle, a lot of people really like them for that because you move twice as fast as a trot and you're not bouncing around. I joke around that I don't want to ride a jackhammer because I'm used to riding smooth. And so I think it's really a luxury, and I enjoy pushing to get more skills and talents out of horses that people think aren't as capable.
Yeah. Imagine you get that somehow. You get comments about how they don't measure up the same as a quarter horse or do some of the same things.
Right.
Have you ridden a gaited horse in a cutting competition or cow working competition or anything like that?
No, not in any kind of competition context, but I have dinked around with cows on them, and like I've been to cow working clinics on them. And once you teach that gear and you get them light on the front end, I mean, they'll jump around. They'll do whatever you need. You know, I asked Buck a question in a clinic about, the 4-beat gait and kind of that. And his response was basically that these Tennessee Walkers, they ought to have a trot in them. You know, they should have all gaits in them. The only thing you don't want them to do is pace, is what he said. But if you need a Tennessee Walker to trot or give you a nice long trot, you should be able to get that. You should be able to rate them up and down and get kind of whatever speed you need.
So the gait that people associate with a Tennessee Walker, is that closer to a walk or a trot? In terms, if you're rating up, if you're walking, my understanding is you would walk and then you would gait, and then I'm not sure what else comes after that. But if you're saying Buck said they should be able to have a trot, is that a walk to a gait to a trot to a canter, or do you walk to a trot to a gait to a canter?
So a flat walk is their lower speed. It'd be more comparable to the speed of a trot. And the flat walk I've found is that you rate them up until they're about to that speed where they'd want to trot, and you just hold them collected kind of in there, and then they'll do that 4-beat gait for you. So it's really all about rating the speed they want to walk and just kind of holding them in, and then they'll find it's a lot more comfortable for them to carry themselves in the gait than it is to trot. Which I'd say is probably partially because when you're not expecting that movement where you might want to go to a post, all of a sudden you're kind of flopping around on them instead of just like riding balance because you're not anticipating a trot. That makes sense. So they kind of figure out, it's a lot more comfortable for me to carry myself in this gait.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you know where that got developed? Who started trying to breed walking horses first?
I don't exactly know who it was. I actually have a picture. I'll slide this over. So that little black horse right there, if you can see, he is called Allen F1, and he was the first ever Tennessee Walker stallion. So I don't know who made him. I know there's a lot of horses that gait. You know, a lot of wild horses have gaits. A lot of donkeys have a gait. So I'm not sure who identified it or started to breed for it, but it's been around for a long time.
Huh.
Do you guys know kind of what a 4-beat gait is compared to a trot?
I do. I grew up with a lot of walkers and stuff.
Yeah. You know, it's kind of interesting trying to translate.
Yeah. Educate the audience.
Well, just layman's terms, and please, you know, you've got experience with this, so jump in. But a horse that's trotting is always on a diagonal, right? We know that the back left, front right move at the same time, and vice versa. But a 4-beat gait is there's always 1 foot off the ground, basically. So you never really want 2 feet off the ground. If you do, you're either trotting or pacing. That's just the simplest way to put it.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's what creates the smoothness is the lack of suspension.
Right. So when you were growing up with
and don't go ahead.
I was just going to ask Joe kind of what your experiences were with them.
Well, way back in the day, my great grandparents bred walking horses because we're kind of like on the eastern edge of what I would consider like the epicenter of gaited horse area in the United States. that kind of goes from like the western part of Virginia kind of west to Alabama, basically. And then you got Tennessee and Kentucky, kind of the southeast part of West Virginia, the Carolinas a little bit. But like the places where walkers and Kentucky Rocky Mountain horses and like a lot of these well-known breeds. And then I guess you could go farther west into like the Missouri Foxtrotters. But it's like, as a whole, I feel like the history of gaited horses in America is kind of like the Appalachias west into like the kind of southern Midwest.
Yeah.
And that was just kind of that's kind of like where there was a demand for these animals, right? And so because it was a very agrarian society, it wasn't necessarily ranching, but there was a lot of, farming. And at that time, you had a lot of diverse operations. So it was like, here's where we run the cattle, and here's where we plant the tobacco, and here's where we, do all these different things. And so like they're around here probably like every fifth pasture you drive by, it's some kind of gaited horse.
Mm-hmm.
And like my grandparents rode them growing up, and like my dad, he has walkers now. He's got 3 yearlings right now that he got. 2 of them he got from a lady who kind of does more of the foundation type Tennessee walkers out of Indiana, because as I'm sure you know, Max, if you're looking towards these McCurdy horses, like same thing that happened with the quarter horse and the saddlebred and all these horses that ended up in the show ring, it really did not do a lot of favors for the breed in terms of like having some like real life utility. So all the horses got really fine boned and started to have these huge shoulders and these kind of ugly croups and stuff like that, but they like were bred for one purpose, which was the kind of big lick gait, or whatever they were looking for in whatever association. So that my dad kind of looks, because he's a bigger, taller guy, he kind of looks for more, I guess you could use the term like foundation type, like farm type Tennessee walkers. And these guys, I mean, these things are big. They're gonna like wear a size 2 and probably finish out about 16-1, 16-2. So nice. They're gonna be big Tennessee walkers.
That's a tall horse. I like them about 15-2.
Yeah.
Beyond that, it's like, man, I got to start before getting my foot in the street.
Yeah. Well, my dad, Ben knows, my dad's a big guy, so he likes a big horse. So.
Well, you're a tall guy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I'm little
dad, though.
Next to my dad.
Really? Well, yeah.
Well, your dad's broad, too.
Who is he? Yeah, he needs a stocky horse.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to see those yearlings he's raising, because that is, I mean, kind of what you described is exactly why I'm downsizing on the walkers, aside from our stud, because he's just awesome. But and he's really stocky. But the McCurdys, they tend to be way broader, a lot more muscle. I heard them described as more coarse, like the old quarter horses used to be. They're just not as refined and dainty as a lot of the Tennessee walkers you see these days. So they kind of ran them wild with Mustangs out in Lowndes County, Alabama.
Well, and the other thing about the walkers too, because just by nature of where I am, I end up starting a fair few gaited horses for people. And man, even when these things are like 3 and 4 years old, I mean, it's not like, obviously we start them and stuff the right way and try to make them feel good about it. But you just look at them and you're like, well, I'm probably not going to get bucked off that thing unless something really goes wrong, because they don't really have much buck in them, just kind of how they're built. But they'll squirt around, man, and it's like most of those things aren't like balanced enough. I'm like, I just don't want this thing to fall over on me. Like, that's why you want them calm enough when you start them, because like some of these Tennessee walking horses now, they can like, they're just so gangly and like have kind of lost all their muscling, and they're like as wide as this laptop I'm looking at,
Right.
and they're just not what I would consider really good riding stock anymore.
Right. Yeah, and it's what are their owners going to really do with them when you look at that and you see that. I heard a statistic, and I don't know if it's true, but I heard the statistic that 80% of equestrians ride their horse 4 times per year. So if that's what you're doing, you don't need a super muscular horse for that. You're probably going to go on your trail ride, and your horse will be tired, and you'll be really proud of yourself at the end, and then you'll hang it up and go on your cruise or whatever you really do with your time. So people aren't using their
wild
horse.
Statistic.
Yeah. So hopefully people don't go Googling that and say Max doesn't know what he's talking about. But it seems in my anecdotal experience pretty accurate. Most people I know who ride aren't actually getting up and riding very often.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the other thing with those horses too is, like, people use them and they like them because of, it's almost like that breed is like one of the only breeds, at least here, that's like has the disposition to put up with the crap people will put them through like 4 times a year.
Right.
Like I know several vets because they are cool horses. They're not. I'm not going to go out and buy a walker for what I want to do, but they are cool horses, and I've had several vets make the comment that they're like a pain in the ass to work on because of how tough they are. Well, one, it's a lot harder to see if they're lame, right? Because they got the gait and everything, and so it's not like you can just trot out a thoroughbred. What'd you say?
People will just see him and think, if my quarter horse walked like that, it'd be lame. So they get a little confused by that. Yeah. But the other thing is, like, a thing can have like a 3-inch puncture in its chest and just gushing blood, and you sit there and it's still got a heart rate of like 15 beats or whatever. Like, they're tough horses, compared to a lot of quarter horses or thoroughbreds and things of that line, where they, like, especially thoroughbreds, right? If thoroughbreds have anything wrong with them, it's very apparent because all systems start overloading immediately. So that is one thing about the walkers. Like the Princess and the Pea.
Absolutely. So I mean, they are like good, tough horses, and I mean, like you said, if you had to like go around the countryside checking sheep all day, it'd probably be a good horse to do it on. Right. You might not want to have to lay down a cow by yourself with one of the horses. I'm sure there's some out there that can do it, but yeah, they're cool horses, and like I said, they have, like Ben alluded to, they have kind of a history of abuse.
Right.
And I've had several vets, even Mark Chrisman, who we've had on the show, his personal opinion is he's like, I think a lot of abusive people gravitate towards walkers because there's not a lot of other breeds that could take that abuse and like continue to survive and reproduce, because they are exceptionally tough. And I've had a lot of vets tell me that. So they're a cool breed. They're not my deal, but they're a really cool breed.
Right. It's really interesting to hear that because I've only ever really owned them, and I mean, I've had a couple other horses, a Mustang or two, and, a few things, but as far as like dealing with pasture injuries or anything like that, it's always been gaited horses. So my context is just, this is how they handle themselves, But that being said, like, I've never had a gaited horse come up with like an inflamed foot type of deal just from something little, like we did when I came over there to Stony Creek.
You better knock on wood
a small
as soon as you can get it.
What was that?
I said you better knock on wood as soon as you can find it. But yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah. But no, that's really interesting you say that. And now I'm going to make it my mission to get each of you guys on a good McCurdy and see what you think of that. Because I think
That sounds like you're just really chewing down on the like McCarty reins.
Oh,
Like you're just
McCurdy.
really from like
McCurdy.
nowhere, Oregon, and just really chewing down on that word. That's what I thought the first time you said that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
No, I'm not that much of a super puncher, dude. I don't have an accent.
Yeah, that'd be really punchy.
Yeah, McCurdy.
Just start a new thing there. I tried to find that statistic. I'm the worst Googler on earth. I even asked the AI app, it didn't know either. So you're probably right. I don't think anyone else found it either.
I'm just gonna use that as
Max,
my.
we could probably
Oh, go ahead.
yeah. You're gonna use that as your personal
I'll just say 80% of equestrians I've met. That's what I'll say.
yeah.
Which
Well, I think
isn't
Joe
really
and I
true,
probably
but-
encounter some folks that don't even ride him at all, ever.
Mm-mm.
I bought a disc. I
So-
bought a disc last summer from a lady
Yeah.
who I'd met at a buck clinic, and it was 2 years after I'd met her, and she said she hadn't ridden since the clinic.
Really.
I just thought that's crazy. You know, isn't that weird?
Yeah. Especially when you ride every day and it's just a part of your life. You don't really think of it as a hobby even. It's just a way of life. It's like brushing your teeth. It would be kind of weird not to ride every day. But I imagine to some people, like if you approach horsemanship like it's golf, you could probably go a year without riding your horse and kind of forget about it. Because I know people that love golf, right? And they will play golf every day. And then I was taken to play golf about 2 years ago. And for a few months, I was kind of into it. In fact, watching the PGA Tour started making sense. And I was thinking, boy, this is kind of fun. I could get good at this. I bet I could whoop, somebody's butt. I could become good at this. And I was playing a lot. And then I haven't played golf in over a year, and I don't care. Like, I have no interest in playing golf. So I'm sure people approach, riding the same way. And then some golf nut would think I was crazy. They'd probably think that I fell off the wagon. They're like, oh, we almost got Ben into golf. It's a little bit like the guys, Joe, your buddies there, or our buddy, Raul Desai. They play the polo cross. And I remember after the first tournament, he reached out to me. And he's like, hey, Ben, glad you came with Joe. Just, I hope you caught the bug. And he was really hoping that I caught the bug. And I was like, no, man, I had a great time, but I didn't catch the bug.
Yeah.
I think people feel similar to the way we feel when somebody gets into horsemanship, or we would just like them to, like one of our clients. They really need help, but they don't really get the bug. They don't get into it like we do. But
Yeah.
I'm sure they have something they're into, like knitting.
Right. Well, just to circle back,
Max, one of the things. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that I've noticed with the horses that get hung up for a year, if you just kind of get on them and just ride around like a sack of potatoes, they're pretty good. And then you take those horses that have been hung up and you try to ride them with quality, and then all of a sudden you quickly are uncovering, the detrimental side of hanging them up for that time. But people will swing a leg over and just be like, oh, well, I can get along fine. I can ride around. Then you start trying to really demand something, and the horse is like, what the heck? This isn't what I've been doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you just brought up a really good point. A lot of times you'll have those horses that they've been ridden really dull, so they're just half asleep. And so working with them in this way, it gets them more aware, and they start getting lighter. And then you send the horse home, and it's almost worse than when it came to you, in a way, because you can ride it. You're getting a lot of things done, but now they've got a horse that actually has its mind working properly. And then you also have those horses that come in, and they're not really dull, but it's sort of like the horses in slavery, It's like, it's just subdued. And then you work with it even after the first or second week, and you're working it in the round corral, and you're showing the horse like, hey, man, you can move out and be a horse. And then whatever you do to get with me is going to be your own free will. And the horse's mind changes. It's like he's lost the chains, and he's like, oh, man, it's like leaving Siberia and entering a democracy. He's like, this is great. But then now you've got kind of a big can of worms, because you got this horse that everything you go to work on, instead of him just dully trudging into it and just being submissive, he's thinking about it. He's giving you feedback on how he feels about it. He's almost like trying to negotiate with you. And because that is horsemanship, right? It's a dance and a conversation. But when you start a young colt, you sort of have that conversation in the first or second year raising the horse on your property. But when you get some 15-year-old horse that's never had freedom of mind, now you work with him for 2 weeks, and it's you got a handful, just because now he's aware that, there's a little bit of free choice in life.
Yeah. So I've only ridden a few, I'm just getting started with riding outside horses. And so how do you balance that in your guys' experience of, do I wake this horse up, or do I encourage it to maintain its kind of deadheadedness because that's what's going to benefit the owner?
I've got thoughts on that.
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Man, wake his ass up. Like, because here's the thing. If he was a deadhead, to use your term, if he was a deadhead and just drudging along and like being quote unquote safe for the owner, why is he there with you? That's one thing I don't think people realize about riding for the public is, yes, there are, like, for example, I was working this morning, and I do get like 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds, and it's just someone has a nice colt they want you to start. But those ones that are kind of dull and people have been riding and all this stuff, if they're getting along good, they're not going to send the horse they're getting along good with to a trainer and pay you to ride him for however long amount of time. There's some sort of issue, and whether they tell you about the issue or not, that's like a whole different human psychological thing. But the only way that you can cover all your bases as a horseman is to, like Ben said, have that conversation. So you need to wake them up so you can have that conversation and see what might actually be bothering them. So yeah, that's my opinion on it, because you're betting against the ticking time bomb if you're just gonna allow the horse to be dull and be like, oh well, he's safe, and there are some people that get along. I'm sure we've all heard the story. There's some person who's like, well, I had such and such a horse for 20 years and I didn't know anything, and I started him myself, and I got along so well with that horse, and that was great. And then that horse kind of got past its prime, and then I got this young horse, and this horse is nothing like the last horse, and I'm 20 years older, so I'm going to send it to a trainer.
Right.
And so there are people who, they beat the odds, and whether it's just a horse with an excellent disposition or they never really demand much of it, they beat the odds, and that whole horse's life, nothing comes out that puts the person in danger. But if they're sending it to you, there's probably something, whether the human tells you or not, there is some reason they are sending you that horse. So you need to get in there and have the conversation with them. Again, I'm not saying like be mean to him and like put his butt in boot camp, but you need to work on holding him to the standard that you hold, the colt you're starting for yourself to. Yeah. Because that's really the only way to do a thorough job, in my opinion.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely. The only thing I'd add to that, beyond what you already said, Joe, is I would just say absolutely, and the sooner the better. Like the sooner the better. Because I think Joe and I have both found that quite a bit. Is every horse you get through, you think, gosh, I wish I would have started on that conversation sooner. It's like having an employee that you waited 2 weeks before you said, hey, sit down, I got some things to tell you. You should have just told him on day one, because now you became a nice guy, and then you've got to walk it back and say, oh, well, I like you and stuff, but look, I've got some real problems with you, instead of like day one, just presenting yourself as the leader. And you can get a new horse in a lot of times and think, well, I'll just sort of keep things nice and calm, and we'll just work into it. And then I'll just work up to the point where I rock his world, instead of just like, probably should have rocked his world, because you're only going to get so much time. It's not like a project you're going to have for the next couple years. If you get a horse in, you can try to persuade a client to leave a horse with you for, 60 days or 90 days. But at the end of the day, they can take the thing away. Like, I've got a contract. They can't take it away till the end of 30 days. I can send it away before the end of 30 days. And of course, that's never happened. And I don't know how that would even hold up in court anyway. But you try to have an understanding. The horse will at least stay 30 days. So you would like to get that conversation started as early as possible. That way you have something done by the end of 30 days. And then you might tell somebody, if the horse isn't working out, you want to tell them that as early as possible too. That way, if it does leave at the end of 30 days and you didn't get very far, it's fine. You've told them. But if it's a good horse and things are going to work out, you still want to start right away, as soon as possible, and just start on the foundational stuff you would do with a colt. Because if you start a colt, you're going to do that stuff just to get going. You have to, but you get some of these older horses, and like Joe said, if they send you a horse to be ridden, there's a reason. And I used to think, oh, this is great, they're sending me a horse that needs a little refresher riding. And no, I hate those horses. I mean, I love them. They're my customers, and they're your bread and butter. It's a good thing to have. I shouldn't say I hate them, but I prefer starting colts, because you get a colt, they're honest. It's just a colt. You start off with the foundation and off you go. And the least handled, the better. But you get somebody's old quarter horse where they're sending it to you for a refresher ride, or, he's perfect. He's got a good walk, trot, and canter, but he bucks when the deer come out of the woods or something. He's probably dumped them on their butt a few times, probably hurt somebody. He probably chews his lead rope. He probably paws at the wall. He does all kind of stuff. He probably does not trailer load. It's not like some horse you're just going to ride for a month. So those are the ones where, to me, a colt, you can almost start it like he's your own horse, and by the end of the month, you got this gentle horse they can ride safely. But those horses that they send to you, where they're like, hey, all he needs is a little work so he doesn't spook when the deer come out of the woods, that's the one I'm going to rope him day one, rope his feet, get a saddle on him like he's a colt, flag him from the back of a saddle horse, all that stuff. Every now and then one of them checks out, but typically they have the biggest problems. Those ones that they've been riding for 10 or 15 years.
Just a tune-up. That's my favorite term, is a tune-up. Like he's an instrument.
Yeah.
It seems like they get really good at being outlaws. If they have an owner who gets scared, those horses get some cool tricks up their sleeve, because they figure, oh, I know how to get out of this in 5 minutes, And then all of a sudden they scare their rider enough times, then they only have to be a saddle horse for 5 minutes a day, or 4 times a year or whatever. Yeah. But that's been an interesting one, when you get on a horse that somebody says is really nervous or flighty, and it's like, oh no, you just got off when it braced, So it got really good at bracing.
Yeah, Buck's got a pretty funny bit about Arabs. I don't know if you've heard him tell that in the clinic, but just about Arabs and how everyone thinks they're dumb and they're skittish and they're weird and spindly and stuff, but really they're very intelligent. And they figured out that if they just walk about 5 steps and then go to the side, they're going to keep getting you off balance to the point where you can't pull on their mouth anymore, because they're trying to combat your bad riding. So they want to, first of all, just get you to where you're holding the saddle and you're just kind of whimpering, and then hopefully you'll just get off and put them away, and then they go off and have a happy life. But if you
it's a pretty good release, they deserve.
Put an Arab through the program, they're not bad, but they're probably the smartest horse breed, because they figured out how to take your average rider out on a ride and just scare the hell out of them and irritate them to the point where they sell them and get rid of them, or keep them out back and don't ride them.
Right.
Yeah.
The only thing the Arab didn't think through is the fact that some people like the way an Arab looks when they're afraid. So they've kind of capitalized on that and made the whole Arab show deal. Like, I was talking to someone about that recently. This is really funny. And they wanted me to start an Arab colt. So I go over there with my fiance, and we're looking at these colts. And there's some issues with their barn, and I told them what I thought, only after they asked a few times, because it wasn't going to be really nice what I had to say. It was going to be kind. It just wasn't going to be like a compliment, you know? And so they're like, okay, well, I mean, that's why you're here. It's all right. You know, I get it. So I was like, okay. So near the end of our visit, I said, you know, you guys should really understand, I don't know anything about Arab showing. I'm not going to teach your horse any Arab showing stuff. If you send your colt to me, he's going to learn to have his head down. He's going to be peaceful and quiet, and you'll be able to put him in the trailer, and he's not going to bite you when you go to pet him. And like, that's how he'll be. He'll be different than all your other horses. I wasn't even trying to be sarcastic, but I had to let them know it was going to be very different than what they had going on, you know? So they're like, okay, yeah, that's all right. So I said, but let me ask you, I don't know anything about Arab showing. Could you tell me about just where some of this stuff came from? So they were telling me about the snout is small, so it can fit in a little pouch when they're traveling across the Sahara. They were telling me about the big nostrils. You know, all that made sense. And then the husband said, yeah, and they've got the tail. Their tail sticks up in the air, and they use the tail to cool their hind end. And then the wife said, no, that's not what it is. And now they're arguing. She goes, no, they use the tail as a ballast. It balances the horse.
There you go.
And then they had another one too, something like, so when they're in the desert, the wind will kind of catch the tail like a sail. But they had the funniest things, right, for why an Arab is supposed to stand in that stance at the show. And I'm like, pretty sure they used to walk them across electric floors and get them to, you know, look like that. So I know the characteristics are, some of them are there from the desert, undoubtedly, but they were trying to make it sound like the whole thing, you have a horse whispering session in the back room and tell the horse to just get ready for the desert, and then you take him out on the show. Instead of you shock the shit out of him and get him afraid enough that he looks like a freaking Arab.
Yeah. And who would want to
but I had a good laugh, and we were nice to him, and we left. Yeah, and they never called me back, and that's all right.
Yeah. Well, you weren't going to make them their scared show horse. You were going to make them a nice saddle horse.
No, that would have been a headache.
They said, if it's not wild in the eye at the end and sticking its tail up, I don't want anything to do with it.
Yeah, what's the
They
point?
had four studs in a barn, and I don't want to make fun of. They were very nice folks. He was an immigrant from not the Ukraine, but one of those countries, right? One of the Eastern Bloc countries. He's a really solid guy, Republican kind of guy, you know, who really values the freedom we have here and stuff like that. So he was a nice guy. They just didn't know a lot about horses, you know. But they had 5 studs in that barn, and every one of those studs, if you walked up to the door, they would just come up and try to bite you. And so then he had a little crop that hung by each door, and then he would just hold that crop. And the moment he was holding that crop, all those horses were the most docile creatures you've ever seen. They just kind of shrunk back and stood there peacefully waiting. So they understood that pretty well.
Yeah. Kind of bizarre. When we first got our stud, I had a farrier. I was kind of trying out different farriers, and this guy came over and he's like, well, you know, I've got studs, and when you go in the stall with them, you better have a 2x4 ready, and if they look at you funny, you get after them. And I'm just like, dude, that is all wrong. Like, I'm still learning, but geez, man, holy smokes, you want your horse to just be terrified of you? And I understand needing to get firm quickly with a stallion because there's a lot of testosterone at play. But if you're just like immediately skip to, I'm going to beat you with the 2x4, what's the result you're going to get? You know?
Yeah. Yeah, Bill and I had a long talk about this last night. How I think it's in Ray Hunt's book, Think Harmony with Horses. In the beginning of the book, he's talking about how his dad had draft horses. And his dad's draft horses, it really stood out to him the way those drafts would come in and be respectful to his dad. And there was kind of a repertoire between his dad and the horses. And it was a working relationship. But we were talking about guys like that and other people in the olden days, back when your horse actually fed you. You weren't all, you know, tree hugger, mamby-pamby, just being sweet and petting them all the time. You required work. You required responsibility out of the horse. but it was also a culture where you understood the horse was not an anvil or a hammer or a board from a fence, or, you understood the horse had feelings too. And so you gave him responsibility and a job, but you also treated him with respect, or most people did. If you were a farmer and that horse was going to feed your family or you were going to die, you probably didn't beat him with a 2x4 as much, because and then if you kill him or you freak him out and he leaves you, like, they figured that stuff out, undoubtedly. Where nowadays, when you pay for your horse, and really it's just a fancy toy to a lot of people, now you have a whole different way of thinking about things. You don't have to give the horse responsibility and care for him and think about his feelings a little bit. Now you can just kind of have this horse. You don't really care if he's messed up or not, because you're going to pay for it. In fact, it might be kind of cool to send him to a trainer anyway, in some people's mind. And now it's just this item. And people really do not, they think about horses so oddly. It's like the first thing that strikes you when you have a client drop off their horse a lot of times, or you talk to somebody just out in the world that isn't really invested in becoming a horseman, is their perception of how a horse thinks and why the horse does things wrong. It's so backwards. And you can see how back in the olden days, when horses actually worked for a living, it probably would be a lot easier to have a conversation about horsemanship and just what a horse's problem is. People didn't say, like Joe was saying earlier, like, yeah, my last horse was kind of weird, but this was great, and I rode it for years, and then this one's just wild and crazy, and I don't know what to do. I doubt they had conversations like that back then. It was just normal. People kind of understood how a horse worked, and they understood it wasn't that much different from themselves. It just was kind of it didn't have a soul and probably didn't love and like start a family and stuff, but it had feelings. It was a being. And now people talk about horses and treat them like they're just some kind of implement, or it's some kind of program, like as if it's like a bad program. Like, hey, I might need to get rid of this one because he's programmed wrong, or unless you guys can update it, but they don't think about it like most of his problems are because of me, because I'm just not,
it's the
I
same
don't feel
people,
back to him at all or support him.
Those same guys that treat them like it's a dirt bike. That's always the example I use, is they don't have a horse, they have a dirt bike. Those same people will spend so much more time maintaining their actual like vehicles and cars than they will maintaining their horse. I've noticed it's kind of an ironic thing that I've observed. And then I also want to just bring up one example, a concise example that's stuck in my mind, what you're talking about with back in the day. But, in Tombstone, when Wyatt Earp's getting off the train and that hand is like whipping his stud with the rope, and he stops him real quick and he's like, don't do that. You guys remember that scene?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That one just sticks out as like kind of the difference between people who think, oh, I'm kind of scared of this thing, I need to get it off me, and people who have a relationship with him. And then my only other comment that I wanted to make on that was actually kind of a counter to yours, where people used to understand their horses better. I would say some of their success in history also came from the fact that they just rode them a lot more. You'd get on and you'd have to go miles to the store on your horse. You had no choice. You didn't get off after a 20-minute session. You really rode that horse. So they learned their jobs a lot easier because you were using them so much harder. Just to kind of counter what you're talking about. It's the same.
Yeah.
We agree.
Yeah.
I think that also added a lot.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah. No, and of course I wasn't around back then. I couldn't speak for the olden days, but I think it almost goes hand in hand, because if you didn't have a phone, or you didn't have social media blowing up on you, you didn't even have people to talk to, you're out in the middle of the prairie and you're a cowboy on the back of a horse all day long, or you're plowing a pasture all day long with a team of 18 horses or mules hooked together, you wouldn't have a lot else to think about. So if you spent your whole life doing that, I mean, if the horse didn't teach you something throughout your whole life, you're either just a jerk or you're just mentally incompetent. But you would think by doing all that work, like you said, they worked with their horse every day, all the time. It was the tool. They probably got some kind of feel from that and understood something. just like people do today, right? If you're a dirt bike guy, you can hear a motocross event and pick out a dirt bike with a missing, with a bad spark plug or something, So if that's all you had going on in life, you'd probably start to probably would have been neat. They probably had a different kind of feel. They didn't think about it like us, or like sit around and, just get very philosophical about it. But I'm sure they had a natural feel that they picked up from doing that much work and not having outside distraction.
It's kind of like everybody is pretty okay driving a car now. Most people are pretty proficient at driving their car. They usually don't die in a car wreck. That's probably kind of how it was with their horses. Is you rode them enough, you got proficient, even if you weren't a pro, that you could drive your car, you'd get to the store, you probably weren't going to crash. Sometimes you do,
Yeah.
I don't know. I like thinking about the history.
I was thinking about, I was just going to say, I was thinking about something similar along those lines, Max, where I can't, so this weekend we're going to be breeding all our cows. And so we've been having to move them around quite a bit this week. And it just means I've been spending more time on like one horse, because it's like we got to go over here and got to go over here, where, riding for the public, it's like you got 8 horses to get through in a day, or, however many horses you're trying to do that day. And like in the kind of the world we are now, especially like the training thing, right? A lot of those guys are like, you just, get on, work on stuff for like half an hour. If he's good, like let him do that, and then put him away and ride him tomorrow. And like, yeah, especially on young horses, I feel like there's a lot of benefit for getting like some quality in a short amount of time, and then just go and letting them be a horse. But there also is a huge benefit, and I know both of you guys, given your background, like if you just spend all day on one horse, like think about the improvement you can feel in the horse. And not even one day, but if you get to spend a couple days just riding one horse, think about how much better it feels. Especially if the horse is kind of maybe young, or comes from a different place and where they haven't had to work. And it reminds me of, you guys ever watch that movie Holes growing up?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe I'm the only one who's seen Holes. Have you seen Holes, Max? So anyway, it's a really good movie, and that was like my favorite book. Yeah. And but he's like, you take bad boys, you make them dig holes in the hot sun all day long, they turn into good boys. That's our philosophy here. And obviously, it's a little more. Yeah, it's a little more nuanced, but there is, like, I'm sure we've all heard the, like, there's nothing better than wet saddle blankets for them, Like, at some point in their education, it's gonna really benefit them to, like, all right, you have all these tools, we've kind of gotten in sync, we're doing the dance a little bit, now we got to go do this dance all day long till the job gets done. And I think there's a certain amount of like character that gets built into a horse from having to do that, Yeah. And I honestly, if I won the lottery tomorrow, I'd probably set up my life to where I had more opportunities to ride some horses like that, because I see how much my horses benefit from that. But the reality of it is, pay the bills, you got to ride outside horses, and so you are, getting on horses between, maybe riding them half an hour to an hour every day if you're lucky, because you got so many horses to go through. And they're still making improvements, but there's really something to be said for like taking a horse and like, all right, it's going to be me and this horse for the next 8 to 12 hours. And then you make a lot of improvement. So if you imagine that's just like your job, that's your life every day, think about how astronomical you could make your feel. You could kind of deepen your understanding between you and that specific horse.
Well, it translates to a lot of other things in life. I'd say that there's a lot of value in that, like, silent period, between asking your horse to do something and asking them to do the next thing, and just being there, being together. I think that when you do work those long hours, And, you know, most people that I talk to, like, especially around here and who ride gaited horses and aren't part of the buck kind of circle, they'll just say, you know, these horses are easy to start. You just drag them a few miles up in the mountains and then you put your saddle on them and drag the other one home. And, you know, I like to get them really good on flat ground, but I think there is a lot of truth to pony a horse. You put a pack saddle on them, you get them kind of worn out, you get them broke to the trail, and then you can start to get by. So that's not totally the way I want to live my life or start my colts, but it is true that just getting them to do something and cover some miles does a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, when I was in college, I knew of a ranch in Montana where they bred a lot of polo ponies, and they would they'd kind of do the groundwork with the polo ponies and just get them to where they could lead. And I guess there was some situation where they needed to pack salt, right? So they just their 3-year-old year, these polo ponies just packed salt, and they did that, and then after they were fit and they kind of understood like a day's work, then they'd start them. And apparently I wasn't there, but apparently it worked out pretty good, like this program they had in place. So I agree with you, like you don't necessarily have to do that to start one with quality by any means, but there is some benefit to be had by like a horse understanding like, oh, okay, I'm a horse, this is my job, you know, I'm willing to put in a day's work. And then you can just it's like having a conversation with a 16-year-old who has a job, or a 16-year-old who, like, I don't know, goes to the mall every day after school. You know, there's just a level of groundedness to it.
Yeah, just desensitize them to the trail.
Yeah. There's also kind of a theory, and it needs more scientific evaluation, but it almost seems like people that don't hardly know anything about horses, it's like nature has a protective law about it. If you don't know anything about horses, you can get a wild horse and try and start it, and you'll survive right on the edge of your abilities. And then as you learn more, you just survive on the edge of your abilities. If you went back and did it like you used to do it before you knew anything, you'd get hurt. And then when you know quite a bit more, now you're surviving, maybe even kind of prospering right on the edge of your abilities. If you went back and tried to do it the way that you did before you knew anything, you might die. You might get in a wreck, get your saddle hung up in the panel. So it is weird, the stuff that people do and they get by, because I see it with the internship that we do here. These guys will show up and they'll have stories about stuff they've done, and you think, oh my goodness, like, how did you survive that? And they'll even do stuff when they first get here, like rope a calf and have it go under their horse's belly, and just weird, goofy stuff, right? And they survive. It actually kind of barely works out. And then after 3 months, they're quite a bit handier. And if you see them do stuff that almost goes sideways, even with the knowledge they have. And you think, oh man, if you didn't even know what you knew now, you'd be dead. And then I know in my own life, I have horses all the time where trouble comes up and you're like, whoa, we're going to work around that. We're going to rope your feet. We're going to test this out. I'm going to put a saddle on you and put a rope around your flank, you know, and they buck like a son of a buck. And you're like, I'm glad I'm not on that saddle right now. But there is kind of a natural law. You watch those YouTube videos of people getting horses going, and you're like, ooh, wow, the Lord loves you. Wasn't your time to go today, because an experienced hand would know better than to do that. It's like a guaranteed way to get in a wreck. It is kind of a weird, kind of a natural law, though. It's almost like somebody's looking out for people that don't know anything.
I don't know about you guys, but I would venture to guess that all three of us probably went through that to a degree till we figured out how to get more serious about all this. You know?
Oh, yeah. I've done some dumb stuff. I have done dumb stuff.
Yeah. And we love it, apparently, you know?
Yeah. Well, you don't know till you know, and you put yourself in situations that are very unsafe. And in hindsight, you're thanking your lucky stars that nothing happened. But now you just have a sense that you're being held to a higher standard because you know better. You're like, I can't do that.
And the
Just
horses
want to be
know it
safe.
too. They hold us to a higher standard, I'd say, once they realize quality. They're like, oh, you
They
better
do.
ride me with it then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, Max, to circle back just a little bit, because we started talking about this because you mentioned, how do you feel about clients and their horses and keeping them kind of dull because they're going to go home anyway. I remember thinking about that early on, and I had people ask me about that saw me working on this kind of horsemanship. And they said, hey, if you get really good, though, like someday, if you ever get really good at this, then you're going to send these horses home and they're going to be, they called it really fancy, I think, or have a bunch of buttons, people talk. And the owner might not know how to ride it. And I did think about that for a little while. But I have found that by starting horses with the foundation that we're learning to do, yeah, it gets them light and handy for you. But if you're doing a good job and you're giving them a good foundation, then they do what you just said. They kind of adjust. They sense that. And when you give them to a total beginner, the horse kind of feels back to them. It's like he learns to feel back to you and be light. And then when someone gets on him that's not as good, his abilities just kind of, he puts some of that away. He's calmer. He kind of feels back to them, and off they go. And it's not a big deal. And if anything, teaching them to feel back to you and really be respectful, really move their feet when they're supposed to, like we were talking about, having that conversation early on, in a way, it helps them. It helps them adjust to someone with lesser ability even better, because now they're more attentive of the human. So instead of tuning you out and being dull that way, they tune in so much that a dull person, they're going to get more dull. Not dull, they're going to get more quiet because they realize there's not as much to do.
They
And
know how
then
to
when
be.
someone gets on them with some ability, they turn right up. Yeah. So it really ends up working out great in the end.
Yeah. No, that's
It's
really
actually kind of a joy. I'll be honest, when you see clients come and ride their horse for the first time, I don't know about you, Joe, but I find it's really fun to watch because you've been riding this horse, and it's easy for me to be kind of down on myself a lot because I'd like things to be better all the time. It's like you're always like, yeah, I know you're doing good, but gosh dang it, get better, and me and the horse. And then you see the owner come ride, and it puts a smile on my face because you see him swing on there, and the horse does great, and it just kind of adjust to them and they go off for a ride. And it even gives you a chance to realize that even though you want to be so much better, hey, you just got their horse started and it's safe and they're riding, and sometimes seeing it, stepping back and just seeing that horse get to work with his owner, it makes you just realize that it's okay. You don't need to paint everybody a Mona Lisa, because that isn't going to probably happen anyway. It's not going to be perfect in your lifetime even. So you just do the best you can, and it always works out pretty well.
We
Yeah.
hold ourselves probably all to a really high
One thing,
just that we hold ourselves all to a really high standard, and the clients tend to also, really have high hopes. And so it's hard when you're looking at yourself going, oh, I thought I could get X, Y, and Z done, but I didn't. And then they get on the horse and the horse is good. And it's like, okay, all right, I did my values there, Anyway, what were you saying, Joe?
Yeah.
oh, I was going to make the comment that a lot of those folks who kind of have the rhetoric of, oh, to ride horses for the public, you got to ride sloppy or get the horses used to just like someone who can't ride, because you don't want the horse to be too light or anything like that. A lot of times their idea of like well-trained horses are like those horses that are like maybe performance horses that really have an edge to them. I'm not saying all show horses are like this, but how there's some horses that like they're really light, but like, yeah, that's because you're kind of sitting on a powder keg, not because they have a really deep understanding of being light. And like, yeah, those horses are, if someone gets on them and doesn't have a high amount of body awareness, those horses are dangerous. But there's a difference between a horse like that and a horse that at least we're kind of trying to make that's light because it understands and is light because it's paying attention, not because it's like, well, I better move my hind end over here. I'm going to get bird like the dickens, you know. So that I think a lot of people who have that, like, you got to ride these client horses sloppy philosophy, they don't understand that the horse can be gentle and light, you know. And it's no reason on, I mean, gosh, it'd be if that was the case, man, wouldn't it be kind of nice, Ben, and you could just like not really have to like improve yourself or hold the horses to any kind of standard. You kind of just like ride the big circle on them every day and then send them home, and you're like, yep, by God, I'm riding horses for the public.
Yeah.
It'd make life easier. You just get to go on a bunch of trail rides all day.
Yeah.
But you know, the truth is, though,
and
that
not have any quality to it.
Still set you above so many of the other people riding outside horses. You know, at least where I'm at out here.
Oh, I actually totally agree with you.
Just doing that.
I totally agree with. That's a good point, Max.
Yeah. So let's not dog too hard on just using them, because the reason I kind of mentioned that point was that I have found a lot of the people who have come to me don't want their horse trained. They want to feel safe and have somebody to hold their hand and get them back to actually doing something with their horse. And that for me is really hard, because I don't really love working with people. I'd rather kind of have my autonomy and work with horses. And so that's why it's kind of like, okay, so if this lady just wants to be able to get on her horse and feel okay, then do I need to put, you know, the quote buttons in there? Which of course we've covered. The answer is yes. But to a degree, if all that stuff is kind of set in stone and I know she's going to ride like a sack of potatoes, then, you know, where do you balance some of that? Of just like, I'm just trying to get along and make sure the horse isn't going to go sideways on her. You know what I mean? Like I'm just, because my clients I've found just want to feel safe.
So this is my kind of philosophy on it. And when I've asked Buck about it, Buck said Ray told him this. And when we talked to Kip on the podcast, Kip said this is what Buck told him, which sounds like just came down from Ray Hunt. When Buck was going to start riding horses for the public, and when Kip was going to start riding horses for the public, and I'm paraphrasing here, but what I got out of it was the advice was, don't try to be a horse trainer. You know, get them gentle, start them like you would start any other horse, but the emphasis definitely needs to be on getting them gentle. Now, at least my personal thoughts, that's not an excuse for having a horse that like won't move its feet when you ask it to. But it's not like I'm trying to send every horse home with a flying lead change, but afraid of tarps. You know, you see what I'm saying? Like, you have to prioritize that all of the groundwork and all of everything you could do with a young horse to get them really, really gentle. You have to prioritize that stuff. But there's an element of, for them to learn all that stuff, you also need to be able to operate their feet like it's your feet. So it's not that you have to prioritize them getting light and being a show horse if you're riding horse for the public, especially the demographic you're talking about, Max, because I would say that's probably the majority of my demographic too. It's just people that want nice, gentle horses that they can enjoy. So,
confidence,
you know, the key is to get them gentle and not try to be a horse trainer.
Yeah. And I think, to piggyback on that if the owner or the rider doesn't really understand the mechanics to ask for some of those things, then the horse probably isn't going to do it. You know, they'll just be used to riding with some legs. So if they do thump them in the ribs, then the horse will just say, okay, I guess this is where I rate up. You know, they're not going to jump around if those foundation things are in there.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, even kind of the basic stuff, like I wouldn't consider a horse to really be gentle to ride if they weren't getting to where they were kind of solid in all the lateral exercises that we do, right? Because if they're not soft and relaxed, then they're not gentle. They're carrying a brace, and it's a matter of time until the brace manifests in some way that maybe a rider can't handle. So like, in a way, the way you can best address getting them gentle is riding them, getting rid of the braces, letting them be relaxed. Like, so they kind of go hand in hand. And I'm sure someone who's done more and is more educated than me could maybe articulate it better, but I know enough that that's kind of the formula, because I've seen it work, and guys I really respect and want to be like have told me that's the formula.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Well, and I've heard Buck say it 100 times, horse training is finite. You can't teach them everything. And so like Joe was just saying, you're getting the horse, the way you get the horse calm and gentle is by owning his feet. And you own his feet, well, through his mind. And so basically you're going to have to work on the whole horse to where he's teachable and leadable and gentle. And then when you pass him on to the next guy, he's used to being leadable and teachable and gentle. So he's not horse trained with buttons, but it all just fits together, right? And you could kind of keep coming at it, and it would just keep sending you on this little circle around that.
Operating with quality.
Gentle is having his feet under control. Yeah.
Yeah. Even with our weanlings that I'll bring in and be getting them halter broke, it might be my first session with them, and I can get them reaching the front on the ground just based on a couple little, the angle of the rope, my body position. So it's mind and mechanics. A horse that doesn't have any idea what you're about to ask will do it if you just ask properly. So that's, I think, the same thing that you're saying.
All right. Well, folks.
Doesn't have to be trained.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just do it with quality.
Yeah. I was just going to say the folks are probably throwing up because we sound like horse trainers now, sitting here spewing out all of our knowledge to the world.
We'll talk
here's a segue. I'll get us out of this like infinite loop we're in then, because I did have this question for Max. You were talking about your weanlings and stuff. These horses that you're breeding, when in their life are you trying to sell these horses? Are you selling like started horses? Are you selling yearlings, 2-year-olds, weanlings? Like, how are you dealing with the being a horse breeder part of your operation?
Yeah, so I'm new kid on the block still. Our first batch of colts out of our stud are just yearlings now. So I'm just getting started. And within that, as I was saying in the beginning, I'm trying to really dial in what I'm doing, cull a little bit, just be more specific about what we're breeding. So ideally, you kind of want to get them sold as weanlings. If you got something really special you want to start, you could feed them and keep them till they're 2 or 3 and then try to sell them as a started horse. But, it's really kind of tough to make your money if you feed them for 2 years, because if anything happens, basically they're not really worth as much as you're into them. But by the time you get the mom, you feed her, you breed her, feed her for a year, she has her baby, deal with that for 5-6 months. That's your cheapest kind of point into that horse. Now I do like when I see one that's really special, it may be worth keeping it, because that might be something that I want to do and I see a certain value that I could associate with it. But I think just as like a full crop, you want to get them out as quick as you can, get them to where they're going to go, let them deal with gelding them or whatever. So yeah, just from a financial perspective, I like to get them halter broke and sell them between weaning and a year, somewhere in there.
Yeah. Man, I'm glad you said that. And I might still be in danger of getting on my soapbox, but at least around me and places I've been, I see a lot of breeders that they're like, I'm going to breed horses and then like keep them and sell them as like 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds. And most people have no idea the pile of input both financially and from a labor standpoint you have to have on those horses, and how it is virtually impossible to get a return on investment doing it that way. And a lot of people, they breed horses as vanity projects, or it's a write-off for some other part of their operation, which isn't a big deal. But when people ask about the actual money-making side, I totally agree with you. I think you have to get them weaned, and that right there is going to be the point at which and it depends on the breed, but generally the point at which what someone will pay for that horse versus how much you've put into that horse, that's the highest difference right there. So I think that's really wise of you.
I try to be honest with people.
Have that approach.
When people ask,
yeah,
would you breed this horse to replace, if they come to me with their horse and say, would you breed my horse? I want to have another one to ride in a few years. And I'll be honest and say, you might as well just go shopping for a 2-year-old, go find something you really like, because by the time you pay me, you raise it, you go get it trained, you start riding it, and you've got a baby you're riding, right? 2 or 3-year-old that doesn't know very much. You'd be much better off to just kind of skip the line and go get something you like, be a good shopper. But yeah, I mean, I maybe it doesn't sound the most ethical to say it, but I think that's just financially, it doesn't make sense to raise them, really.
Yeah, I agree. And you're right. There's something to be said for wanting your horse to end up in a good spot and a good home, because down the road that'll add to the reputation of you and your operation. But I don't know. At some point, like with ethics, other people have to carry the load too, right? Like, you don't buy a horse if you're gonna put it in a bad situation, a year and a half down the road when you need to start it or something.
Yeah. And is it reasonable to blame me for behavior that changed after it left?
Well, what you do is you just, you give them like a 10% discount or something if they need to bring it back to you to start in a couple years.
There you go.
And you get your feedback loop there. I won't even charge you for that idea.
Thank you, but then I have to deal with all the bad habits that they taught my weanlings, Because for me,
well, if you're riding horses for the public anyway,
yeah, fair. They all have those.
You can either deal with, whatever comes out of every nook and cranny out there, or at least ones that you'd consider well bred.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And the flip side of kind of my answer from a minute ago is that we do have some really nice colts hit the ground, and I probably will hold a couple back because I can see in my mind, what that horse will be as a really good start at 3-year-old. The way I raise it, I like to turn them out and just put them out on 500 acres when they're 1, and just let them grow, and then bring them in, and they don't have any negative association with people. They don't have any of that. So if I see something that I can associate a higher value with, then I probably will hang back and ride it and keep it or sell it as a 3-year-old. So there are special circumstances, but
yeah, really. I mean, the way to become the most successful in the horse industry is probably undoubtedly to be honest, because the market's already pretty saturated with dishonest people. So, like you said before, that's probably your best way to go. And then if it's not a financially smart thing you're doing, just don't do it. Figure something else out. But being honest seems like a pretty hot seller in the horse industry.
I got to ask myself frequently, every time I breed a horse, what's the next 30 years going to look like for this thing? Is there a market for people who are going to want it? Because I don't need to be a puppy mill of horses. I want to add to the breed and fulfill a spot in the market that's for sure there. But if the market crashes, then all of a sudden I put all these animals into the world that I did, I created that horse kinda, and I want to make sure that somebody's going to want that thing for a good while and take care of it. So that's something I ask myself a lot, really pretty much every time I breed one, is where's this going to be for 30 years? So
Yeah.
hopefully that
Yeah, that's
works.
really good because it's so different than raising cattle or raising some kind of livestock for meat. It's you can raise as many as you want. They're going to get used. But I don't think as many people think about that with horses, Max. I think they don't think ahead at all. I think they think about, all right, horses are selling, prices are up right now. I'm going to capitalize as much as I can. And then 10 years from now, when who knows what'll be happening, right? But they're not thinking about that at all. They're just trying to capitalize now for me. If the market's good, yeehaw, you can sell a horse for a lot of money. And it's so gross. I've been hauling some horses recently, and I've had the chance to deliver some horses that I felt kind of gross delivering them for people, just because I didn't even realize it till I delivered it. But then it was a couple of horses that were bought by somebody online from a trainer that I guarantee you they've already been bucked off by now. But it's just not going to end well. But it's that kind of a thing. You see it, and people don't suspect you of realizing that because you're just the guy transporting the horse. But
Were
you're
they
like, wait a
pretty
minute,
colors?
you
Were the
sold
horses?
this horse to them? Yeah,
Well,
yeah, palominos and paints
yeah,
and stuff.
yeah, buckskins, rounds. Yep.
But you just totally see it, just capitalization on the fact that the horse market's up. Yeah, it's kind of gross. It makes
Yeah,
you
for
it makes
sure.
you want to run from that and just have some ethics about your business. But Max, something that I wanted to get into a little bit, because outside of horses, you are a very interesting guy. And I remember when you were here, something you said to me. Um, you said that I think when you were 18, maybe you were young, you said you took off several years and you just tried out a lot of things. You wanted to explore and try out a lot of things. So we've been talking about horsemanship, and clearly you're very invested in that, and that's a huge part of your life. But just that kind of thinking, um, kind of where all did you go? What did you do? But most of all, what informed that decision in your life?
So I was pretty lucky that my parents had a lot of foresight about higher education, and by that I mean they they taught me that unless I wanted a specific specialized career, that the investment in a college was probably not going to be super beneficial. But I looked at that period of time and thought, I don't know anything, I'm just I'm green as ever. So how do I get interesting? How do I become interesting and educated? So I decided, a lot of people will do 4 years of college and a lot of them will take a gap year. So I just set myself on the path of saying I'm going to do a 5-year plan, and that the only basis of that plan was for 5 years I was going to pursue the most interesting and educational options I could, and specifically not try to pursue making a lot of money. So I was not going to make any of my decisions about how I was going to live my life based on a financial gain. For 5 years, I was just going to try stuff. And so that's what I did. And it culminated, almost to the day with my wedding. So it was kind of cool how it worked out, that was just, God's plan, I guess. But yeah, that was the 5-year plan. And I started it, I guess at 19. And just bounced around a lot, lived a bunch of different places, and tried stuff.
So when you decided that at 19, were you living at home?
I was living. Yeah, I was living at home. I had finished working on the big outfits. I was kind of an outlaw and had gotten in some trouble, so I had to go home. Had to deal with just a little, misdemeanor. But decided after that I went to Nashville first. That was the first place I went. My sister was out there, and she had got a job in a townhome and lost the job and had a year-long lease. So I was like, shoot, I'll help her with rent and we'll go to Nashville. And so it wasn't like a super cool job or anything. I went to the mall and got 3 jobs. I got a job at TGI Fridays and at a kiosk selling jewelry cleaner. And then I got a 3rd job at Lucky Jeans, but I only worked there a couple days. I was like, yeah, I'm not going to do retail like that. But yeah, that was the first stop.
Huh.
And then after that I went and worked for this guy named Wes in Northern California. He was a big marketer, like big time marketer. He worked with huge brands like Apple and Microsoft. And so I was driving through. I stopped by to see my friend. He offered me a job. And we started like shooting a lot of videos together, just social media content. And that's where I got linked up with going to New York and meeting with Gary Vee and his team and consulting with those guys. And Wes, actually, now he runs a dude outfit. He was not that way back in those days, but now he's come back. He's seen the light. So he's running a guest range now, which is kind of cool. You know, that was not part of our deal at all. But yeah, that was step one, and that's how I got kind of started on the video stuff.
That's quite a story. I think a lot of people want to do what you did for 5 years, but a lot of people don't know where to start. They don't. I think a lot of people actually, Max, they're not willing to go work at TGI Fridays and sell jewelry cleaner to start out. You know, a lot of people don't think of just like, well, I'm going to just go to the city where my sister is and get a job at the mall. And, you know, they're like, no, I want to do something great. I want to do this particular thing. And then it's just very hard to get into that. But
right. Yeah, and
pretty cool. You went somewhere, you did something. You have to get good at going somewhere and starting something before you can do the particular thing that you want to do.
Yeah. But, you know, wherever you go, there you are, you know, and you find, you know, birds of a feather type of deal. So Here I was at the Opry Mills Mall, right? So I'm in the same parking lot as the Grand Ole Opry. And everybody who's 18 to 30 in Nashville is a talented musician, you know, pretty much. So then you start to just, you make these connections, you know, and I've got connections from TGI Fridays who are at the top of country music right now. So it's just, you know, wherever you go, you'll find your people. It doesn't really matter what you do. You know, that's been my experience anyway.
But you gotta do something. Can't just sit in your basement, I guess. So at what point, where along that journey did you then come back to deciding to start Young's Ranch? And is that did you start Young's Ranch, or is that
so
has that been around for a while, like in your family?
Yeah, I do this with my dad. So
okay.
There are horses.
Wow.
And yeah, we always had horses, and it wasn't until the end of the plan. It was when I moved home with Suzanne, my wife, that we started really buying horses.
Yep.
Got stud, and so that was really the very end of the plan. We had we had like 3 mares and had a couple babies, but it was just, you know, we were the 4 times a year kind of deal back then. But yeah, the 5-year plan was cool, man. One of the coolest parts was I went and lived in Hawaii for a year. I lived on Maui, and the first place I was on 9 acres up in the mountains. I lived in a tree house in the rainforest, and you know, they had a little farm, and that's kind of how I got. Why they gave me that job was because I had this marketing background, and they could use me to fix up their jungle. And so yeah, I mean, it always just. I actually was in a town called Makawao, and it's one of the only places on Maui that has like a rodeo. There's a lot of horses up there, so it's just kind of funny how you end up where you're meant to be.
Yeah. Did you get to visit any of the ranches out there? What island is the Parker Ranch on? I forget.
The Big Island.
Is that the Big Island?
Yeah. Did
you make it to any of those out there?
No, I made it on some ranches on Oahu. It's all kind of locked down by the government, most of it. But where I was on Maui, there's some people that had horses. There's a guest ranch up there, so I kind of palled around with some people. But it wasn't what I was doing, man. What I really ended up doing was being a beach bum, growing my hair out, body surfing every day. You know,
Oh yeah.
I did the Hawaii thing. I'm a little bit of a chameleon. If I'm there, man, you catch me at the thrift store, and I'll become a local. You know, that's what I like to do.
Yeah. So are you still like that now?
Well, I live like 9 miles from where I was born now, so I am a local.
Well, I mean, when you go on vacation, like if you went on a long vacation, would there be a max beach bum still, or a,
Oh yeah, dude, big time.
you know? Yeah.
Big time. I'm a total hippie.
I think that's the one thing. A lot of the cowboys and stuff that I know, they don't stray too far from their style. I remember when I was working in Montana, there was a fella that went on vacation. He had been there long enough. He got like a paid vacation, and he sent home pictures from, I think it was Panama City. He's on the beach, and he was wearing his jeans and his boots and his hat, felt hat, long button-down shirt. You know, like he was a cowboy just sitting on the beach. He had a very hard time putting on shorts and going swimming.
Right.
It's weird. I think he felt some kind of sense of honor toward he was supposed to wear his cowboy gear. But I understand that to an extent. I don't know. After a while, if you're gonna go swimming, you kind of can't wear your boots and your jeans and all that stuff.
Yeah,
You got to fit
don't get
in.
me wrong. Like
But,
I've been.
I know
here
some guys are very, yeah.
here on the Oregon coast. You know, if it's all rainy and nasty, like I'm not going to dress different because I'm at the ocean. But if I'm in a tropical place, I mean, what am I trying to prove? You know, who am I? I just want to be comfortable.
That you're a cowboy, man.
Yeah, Billy Badass.
Come on. Hell yeah. Let them know.
No, I like to try to gain as much perspective as I can, and part of that is just wherever you are, you know, try to be present, try to understand the culture around you. I really like that.
That's a good perspective to have. I haven't traveled a ton, but I kind of tend to agree with you. Like if you get the opportunity to be in Hawaii, like be a Hawaiian, you know, you can always go back and be who you really are. But if you get the opportunity to go somewhere and embrace it, you'll probably learn more that way. So it's cool that you have that perspective. I like that.
And people like you more if you embrace their culture, you know, not trying to like hijack it or not be authentic. But if people see that, you know, you're there and you're 100% all in, then you make friends with locals, you know. And so like there was a point where I was knocking doors on Maui selling solar electricity, and I was kind of in a bad neighborhood. And this uncle, you know, this big uncle in the neighborhood say, hey, you know, if you go down that way, you might run into some families who are going to give you a hard time. They might let their dogs out and stuff. You just tell them you're with Uncle so-and-so, you know, just say I'm your uncle and you'll be good. And I had to. I ended up being like, oh yeah, Uncle so-and-so, he told me to come this way and talk to you guys. And they're like, oh, cool, man, have some green bottles, you know. All of a sudden you're part of their community because you've immersed yourself. Yeah. You know, people respect you, but you're not trying to fake it. You know, you're not trying to put on a costume. But I got really good travel advice. That was like the first thing you do when you get to a new country or new city is you go to a local shoe store. That's an immediate tell is what kind of shoes somebody's wearing. So that kind of stuff, you know.
That's cool advice. I've never heard that.
Yeah. If you'll start to notice it, you know, you pick up these little things for observing things socially, like when you're in a new city and you start looking at the ground, and the locals they know how to live there.
Oh
yeah,
boy, this whole podcast might have been worth it just to hear that. Do you have a big shoe collection from your travels?
I wear them out, man. Wear them out and throw them out. I don't even wear.
What's the weirdest footwear you've encountered in your travels?
Well, I haven't traveled that much, don't get me wrong, but I mean, in Hawaii, it's like if you're not wearing slippers, aka flip-flops, you know, you're clearly a tourist. But I don't know, man. Like you see European shoe styles, you know, they've got like these real rounded leather toe
Well, I was picturing you, Max, in a pair of those wooden clogs in Holland. That's like where my mind goes when you say buy the local shoes. Oh man, I guess when you go, you'll have to snap a pic and send it over
for sure.
Wooden clogs.
You need to take some arch support for those wood shoes, though.
Yeah, maybe put some gel pads in there or something.
Yeah, that was one thing. A couple years ago, Kaylee and I went to Spain because my cousin was marrying a Spaniard over there, and so we spent like a week over there. And that was one thing we noticed. We were like looking around, and we were like, "Have you noticed that everyone is dressed so much nicer than we are all the time?" You know, like there was no one like, "Oh, that guy must have just come from the gym," like there is in the States. You know, like if you go around a town, there's at least one guy in like basketball shorts and sneakers and stuff. Like Spain had none of that. Everyone was dressed very well all the time. So not that I was wearing that, but I felt like I stood out. I was also 6'3" and blonde, so I already stood out in Spain. But but like that the shoe thing is a very good point though, because they were all wearing shoes that you probably never, unless you went somewhere like Miami or something, somewhere that was like really trendy and probably had a Latin influence. Like the style of shoe was very different from anything I had in my bag. And I'm just now thinking about that. So that is good advice. I'll keep that little nugget.
Kind of cool, you know, budget a couple $100 for a nice pair of kicks. And it might make you some inroads with some locals or keep you from getting robbed or something.
Yeah.
But
sounds good. Yeah,
we
thanks
are
for
very,
the tip.
very casual here. Too casual, probably.
Yeah.
I took my wife out for a date on Valentine's Day, and the guy comes in with his wife wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt, and you know, just like you're talking about, like gym clothes. But it's like, you know, 8 p.m. on Valentine's Day, and I'm like, and this guy's probably in his 60s. Just like, where are we? Where this is a normal, you know, dignified adult.
Yeah, that's a tough look.
It's weird to me.
Yeah. Well, it's I think it's laziness culture, because most people would tell you, well, it's just easier, it's more comfortable. Because if people try to act like they're not lazy, right? They'll say, they don't say it's harder to dress well. That isn't really a big deal. They just say it's comfortable to wear this, and it's accepted by society. But therein kind of lies the laziness, is the fact that you want to be comfortable. And I heard this statistic this morning. I'm about to get in the same boat with you, Max, on the statistic thing, because I could be wrong, but it was something like 2% of people take the stairs when there's an elevator present. Like that's very few people that take the stairs, and it meant like not in like a 50-story building or something. We're talking about like in a small building where you just have to go up one flight. They take the elevator. And there was a bunch of other statistics beyond that. I forget all of them. That wasn't even a very good one to pick from, but basically it was a bunch of statistics about just laziness culture and how it all works back into our society. But it was simple things like the dressing poorly in public, you know, where it takes a little more effort to put yourself together. But hey, it's easy to throw on. You know what? Don't even throw anything on. Just wear your pajamas, you know, and just head on out into the world and then expect to be taken seriously.
But it seems to be so common now, you know, and it's almost like there's like these more formal looking gym clothes, you know. I guess it's that streetwear.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like even when Spaniards like go to the gym, like everything's like fitted and you know, just like high quality stuff. But yeah, I don't know where that comes from. I think part of it probably is like professional sports, stuff like that. Like people, like how people in professional sports have kind of become, they've influenced culture so much more probably in the last 30 years than they ever could before. And so, you know, if you're an athlete, which I don't blame them. If you're an athlete, like that's literally your job. So it's like, yeah, I'm wearing sweats because I exercise for like 8 to 10 hours a day every day because it's my job. And I feel like it's made that trendy. I mean, think about like how many people have like Lakers jumpsuits because of Kobe Bryant and stuff like that. So
I think you're exactly right, because that look that I'm describing is like when the team walks out to the bus. You know, they're all in their real nice, crisp t-shirts and nice, crisp sweatpants, and that is the look. So I think you're right. I'm not a sports guy at all.
Yeah,
I don't watch any sports. So what you're describing sounds exactly right. It's like the high school athletes. You know, they've got the slides and socks and slides, and it's a culture.
Yeah. Well, it's like if you know you grow up and your hero is John Wayne, and you dress like John Wayne. You grow up and your hero is, you know, Michael Jordan, then you want to dress like Michael Jordan. You know, like there's a lot of places where like having a like really nice clean pair of Jordans, that's the same thing as having like a handmade pair of cowboy boots that are like really high quality cowboy boots and like a custom made hat. Is this really nice pair of Jordans? Like in some circles, it's like the same level of status.
That's luxury.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're talking about a different demographic, though. I was referring more to like the people of Walmart, that demographic.
Yes, I agree with that as well, Ben.
Just like, oh my goodness.
That is a lack of effort, a little bit.
Yeah, no kid. Because
even Walmart sells shirts with collars, you know, for Valentine's Day.
Exactly. Yep.
You know, you can get 5-cent ties.
I see it as the same demographic, though. It's just some people can afford nicer sweatpants than others. I do think it's the same mentality, though, of people who just don't want to put a belt on or lace up their shoes, you know.
Well, they might
Welcome
have some
to the
nice
like
underwear
old man part of the podcast.
Well, that's just it, though. I mean, I don't know. Someone's got to say something. Not that anyone hears us, but
yeah.
But I don't know.
No. I liked what we were saying, but you know, you take a step back, and I was like, okay, here's the part of the show where Ben, Max, and Joe turn to like grumpy old men. Say, can you believe what these people were wearing? Like I've literally heard my grandfather have this conversation.
That's in our buttons, guys. We're so fancy. We're so much better than everybody else because we got buttons.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, man, we better wrap this thing up. I just remembered I've got to press my shirt, and I'm in line for the iron, so I don't want to miss my spot. But Max, thanks for coming on, man. It's been really fun hanging out with you.
Yeah, thank you, guys. I'm glad we got a chance to really sit and chat for a little bit. So I really appreciate the invitation.
Absolutely, man.
Absolutely.
We'll have to get you back and do one of these in person. That really is like, I really like doing this podcast, but one thing about it is talking to all these interesting people each week, and I'm like, man, if just the three of us could be in the same room, like the next level of conversation could happen. So luckily with you, I feel like that's not out of the realm of possibility. We'll have to get that done sometime.
I should be back out your way, at least Ben's way in July, I think. So maybe I'll see you, Joe.
Yeah, we'll see what we can get done, man.
That'd be great. Yeah, it definitely cuts down on some of the delays and stuff when we're all in person. Because apologies, folks. I know I've been talking over everybody. I've got some kind of a delay going on. But anyhow, as usual, you guys can find us on Facebook and Instagram as well. So you guys can follow along there. We post the new episodes every week as they come out. And stay tuned. We got hot stuff coming your way. And we will see you guys later. All right. Take care.